With the final part of Attack on Titan right around the corner, with part 1 of the final season of part 3 or whatever the hell coming out on March 3rd, conversations revolving around Attack on Titan have re-sparked. People have began to ask the questions, how do Armin and Mikasa plan on stopping Eren? They began to wonder how strong this Doomsday Titan form is of Eren's. But most importantly, people have found themselves divided on the topic of, is Eren justified? Is Eren, by activating the rumbling to kill everybody outside of Paradise Island, the correct thing to do? Is it morally justified, or is it just a means to an end? And so far as conversation goes in the anime community, this is arguably one of the most interesting ones we've ever had. I'd argue it's the most interesting conversation we've had in anime since Madara's plan to use Infinite Tsukiyomi to give everybody on Earth their own personal heaven became apparent to the reader. And much in the same way as when Infinite Tsukiyomi was revealed, readers are pretty much unilaterally divided, with just as many people believing what Eren is doing is morally just as those who believe it's not. And while I'm absolutely one for having moral or ethical conversations based around topics in anime, one of the more aggravating talking points I've seen revolving around this conversation is that morality is subject to a person's own views. The ethics and morals don't actually exist because whether or not the person believes it ethical or moral is entirely up to the individual. This is dumb and also false. Confusing ethics and morals with personal taste is just inaccurate and also an incredibly dangerous way of thinking. Yes, you of course are allowed to have your own will or your own thoughts, but ethics and morals are universally agreed upon unspoken human rules, which are usually spoken and written down in laws or religions. The reason that I'm opening this video claiming that type of ideology is stupid is because I'm not going to finish today's video and say what Eren is doing is entirely subjective and up to you as to whether or not you deem it to be moral and or ethical. Because while there obviously is moral and ethical gray areas, and as society shifts through the times, those gray areas may either get bigger or smaller, there's one area that's never had moral grayness, and that is the taking of somebody else's life. So what I'm trying to say is that I will not be ending this video in an ambiguous fashion. There's not going to be any, well, you know, it's up to you kind of thing. Today, we're going to weigh the pros and the cons of what Eren is doing by activating the rumbling. And then by the end of the video, I'm going to give you my stance as to whether or not I believe what he is doing is the correct thing or not. But before we get into any deep philosophical conversations, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while you guys are at it, if you want to hear not so deep philosophical conversations from me and Danny Mata about everything that happened in anime this week, then I got a podcast for you. Because me and Danny Mata just started a brand new podcast called Otaku's Anonymous, where we break down everything that happened in anime this week. But before we get into all that, guys, today we got to talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Athletic Greens. Listen, we all know I like to stay in shape. Self-care is incredibly important to me, and a big part of my self-care routine is Athletic Greens. You see, Athletic Greens is a nutritional company focused on making self-care and nutrition a lot easier. You see, my favorite Athletic Greens product is AG1. You see, AG1 is a nutritional drink you drink 1 scoop of a day. You mix this 1 scoop in the provided bottle with a little bit of water, shake like your mama taught you, and drink. And it's that easy. But why drink AG1? Well, I could list off that it gives you an energy and immune system boost, brain function boost, gut health boost, but how about I tell you what it does for me? AG1 increases my energy and endurance. AG1 gives me nutrients and phytonutrients that help me support and sustain my high energy levels. And this helps me both in the gym and while recording content. AG1 achieves this by including key energy players that maintain energy levels, support adrenal health, and work together. Things like vitamin K2, vitamin B12, and beetroot powder keep my energies at an all-time high. On top of that, AG1 helps me with my brain health. Believe it or not, a lot of this job is thinking. AG1 includes a bunch of ingredients that are crucial in keeping high-performing athletes and high-performing content creators like myself in the zone. AG1 includes vital adaptogens that help you recover from burnout and stay focused. It does this by supporting your adrenal health and helping you recover from stressful situations. It achieves this with things like vitamin B6, magnesium, and green tea extract. So what are you guys waiting for? Get up to my level and get to drinking AG1. So what are you guys waiting for? Use the link in my pinned comment or my description to get a free year-long subscription to D3K2 and 5 travel packs for free with your first purchase, of course. But guys, you can't put a price on your own health, mental or physical. So morals and ethics. While I do wish I could say that everything on Earth has a concrete moral or ethical score, unfortunately, that's not reality. Like I've already stated, sometimes as society changes, things that were once moral are now immoral and vice versa. But that's only so far as human perception. See, I guess in order to make this video as clear to you as possible, I don't believe ethics and morals genuinely apply to the human psyche, because the human psyche is subject to change and it's fickle. I actually believe that morals and values have been tied into humanity since we walked on all fours, and that the morals and ethics developed by our bestial selves are probably the best representation of what they actually should be in society. See, the true problem with consciousness is that you can think of a lot of things, and as people begin to think of things, people become divided on said things. But when it really genuinely boils down to it, I don't believe morals should come from here, but from here. Take, for example, marijuana products. Marijuana products are a great example of what somebody would point at and say, well, the moral perception of marijuana over the last 50 or so years has greatly changed. Within the confines of my argument, it hasn't, because consuming a marijuana product in a safe environment where you're not a risk to anyone has never been morally incorrect. Though the public perception of some groups and some people may have perceived this as morally unjust, my perception and a lot of people's perception of morals and ethics is so long as it doesn't hurt other people, it is morally just. However, if you were hypothetically to take an edible and then get behind the wheel, that is morally unjust, as your altered perception of reality puts you at a greater risk of getting in a car accident and hurting somebody else. Another great example of this is something like same-sex marriage, or even just same-sex relationships. You see, same-sex relationships in ancient Greece and ancient Rome were very common. And outside of that, we also see same-sex relationships in animals who aren't humans, telling us that it doesn't require sentience to a human level to find the same sex as a mate. However, as human perception and psyche changed throughout the times with the rise of things like Christianity, same-sex marriage became what some would believe as morally unjust. But it never was, because once again, very simple rule of the fact that you choosing the same sex as your mate does not injure anyone around you, or not around you for that matter. Moral and ethical choices avoid conflict and avoid harm.
So Nick, what happens in circumstances where, let's say, somebody's pointing a gun at me?
Would the morally correct thing be to simply let them shoot me? Or would I be justified ethically or morally to fire back? Well, for that, once again, we have to ask the question of what would our bestial self do? And the answer is self-defense. There's a reason that almost every country on Earth has self-defense laws. If somebody aggresses against you, you can aggress back, which segues us perfectly into this conversation about Eren. First, I want to open up with the pros of Eren activating the rumbling. The first of which, and arguably the most important pro of Eren activating the rumbling, is that it guarantees that no outside force will ever launch a war on Eldia. That is to say that by Eren eradicating every single person outside of Paradise Island, nobody will ever launch an external war into Paradise, which is exactly what Eren is trying to achieve. Eren, in essence, by activating the rumbling, is guaranteeing Paradise's island safety from the outside world. Keep a mental tab on the fact that I keep saying the outside world. And the second most important pro when talking about Eren activating the rumbling is that when given the choice between his loved ones and those who hated his loved ones, he decided to let those who hated his loved ones die. You could say this is an act of self-preservation, but that's complicated, mostly based off the circumstances, which we'll obviously talk about more later. So in essence, Eren is eliminating an enemy force that may or may not be threatening his loved ones, thus guaranteeing the safety of Paradise Island. And for all intents and purposes, it's what he believes to be correct. It may even be what he believes to be morally and or ethically correct. But before we talk about Eren's perception, we have to talk about the cons of activating the rumbling. And on the side of the cons, the most prominent thing said is that genocide is never the option. This is to say that regardless of the situation, eradicating an entire group of people is never the choice. The con side of the argument would tell you that a preemptive genocide to stop a possible genocide is still very much a genocide. In fact, it's an aggressor genocide. The best way to explain this first point in the con is to simplify it. Imagine you're in a relationship and you think, not know, but think that your significant other is cheating on you. Therefore, instead of confronting them about this possible problem that you might have in your relationship, you decide to go out and cheat on them. You may perceive it as getting even, but in reality, you're operating based off an assumption. And now the only concrete thing that's happened is you've cheated on your significant other. Now imagine you could see the future and also the past and also the present on a million screens simultaneously. This is how the Founding Titan sees existence. You see, the Founding Titan and those who control the Founding Titan have the ability to see the past, present, and future simultaneously. Because, and I've said this in previous AOT videos, the timeline in Attack on Titan is not linear. It's a circle where everything that's ever happened is happening and will happen is happening concurrently. And the Founding Titan is able to cast their consciousness into any of those slices of the circle. Now, obviously, mastery over something like this as a human who sees time linearly takes a lot of time, and nobody's actually ever truly mastered it. Because of this, those who have inherited the Founding Titan are said to be incredibly spacey, because while their body may be in what you perceive to be the present, they're existing in all timelines simultaneously. So one of the other possible cons when talking about Eren activating the rumbling is the fact that he should know how it ends. I'm not saying that he does, or even that there's a high possibility that he does, but there is a possibility. But even prior to Eren acquiring the Founding Titan, he still made a couple of decisions that look not so great. See, even before Eren acquired the ability to control the Founding Titan by breaking Ymir out of her chains, he had made the decision to exclude the likes of Armin and Mikasa and Coney and Sasha from his Jaegerist plans, choosing instead to recruit the likes of Flock and a couple of other people. And this is because Eren understood that those closest to him would not support this plan. This is why he had to basically force all of these friends to come save him when he invaded Marley by himself. This is why Levi and Hanji and basically everybody else was so pissed off at him, because the plan for Eldia was not to invade Marley. He made that happen. But since Eren had essentially forced the hand of Eldia to invade Marley, hundreds, if not thousands of Eldians died, one of which being Sasha.
Holy Quinto. Oh my god!
Ironically, being incredibly counterintuitive to what Eren is supposedly trying to accomplish. And once again, somebody could argue that this invasion into Marley was necessary in order for Eren to acquire the powers of the Warhammer Titan and a couple of other important things. But when the goal is to save Eldians, forcing Eldians into war is a weird move. On top of this, like I stated earlier, Eren understood that Mikasa and Armin and Coney and Sasha would not support his Jaegerist plans, which is why when the Jaegerists took over, he locked all of them up, which means that Eren fully understands that even within the Eldians, there is a dichotomy in ideology, with one side of the Eldians being Jaegerists and the other being not Jaegerists, Mikasians, Hanjiites, you get it. And even though at this current time he didn't have the power of the Founding Titan to see that these non-Jaegerists would break out of their jail cell and have to kill their own comrades to catch up with them, by dividing the Eldians down the middle based on whether or not they believed everybody outside of Paradise Island needed to die, Eren has kind of undermined everything he's trying to accomplish. Harken back to earlier in the video when we were talking about external threats, the threats of everybody outside of Paradise Island, those who aren't the subjects of Ymir. Eren, by hatching the Jaegerist plan, was completely aware that it would split Eldia down the middle, which would possibly and did give rise to internal conflict, causing those who are once Eren's friends to have to cut down other Eldians, once again putting Eldians in danger. And every drop of blood that Mikasa or Armin or anybody fighting against the Jaegerists sheds is on Eren's hands. And there's a saying that you're only good as the company you keep. So by Eren ditching those who have now become the pseudo main characters of Attack on Titan because of their stances that genocide is never the correct thing to do, in order to work with the likes of Flock, who believed that Erwin should have been given the Titan serum just so he could extend his suffering for another 13 or so years, and it begins to become somewhat apparent that Eren might be heading in the wrong direction. Because, and I would like to go back to an earlier point when we talked about the preemptiveness of this genocide. See, if you could 100% guarantee that if Eren wasn't to activate his rumbling, that the entirety of Paradise Island would be killed, then this act of the rumbling is 100% self-defense. But you can't guarantee that. Diplomacy wasn't off the table. And while you can say,
Well, yeah, but Marley was planning another attack on Paradise and trying to get other countries to assist in this attack.
the possibility of a conversation between Paradise and other countries was not 0%. In fact, I argue that a conversation of this sort could have almost been guaranteed to have happened if something like the rumbling was threatened. And now I know what you're saying. You're saying,
Well, threats don't last forever, and the second that the technology of the outside world catches up with Titans, well, bye-bye Paradise.
but think about that statement for a second. You're saying that the second that the technology of the outside world is able to easily kill even the strongest of Titans, that Paradise will go extinct. But why? In essence, you're saying that when the rest of the world is as strong as Paradise Island, they'll all group up together to kill Paradise Island. But at that point, what's the motivation of everybody in the outside world to attack Paradise Island? See, the reason that all the countries on Earth want to come together right now is because they currently don't have the technology to battle against something like the rumbling. This would be like if you threw 2023 America back into the early 1900s. And America in World War I had drones and F-18s and nuclear warheads. Of course, in that current moment, the rest of the countries around the world would want to get rid of America because they would, at that point, have the ability to wipe out the rest of humanity. But think about the world right now. There are 24 countries with nuclear weapons. Weapons stronger than anything even the founding Titan could pull off, because even a small nuclear warhead would wipe Doomsday Titan off the face of the earth. And yet we exist in a somewhat state of peace, because there's no clear, massive, insurmountable gap in power between the countries at the top. It's called mutually assured destruction. So if Paradis no longer poses a world-ending threat, why would the entire world try to attack them? At that point, they would just become France. And I know what you're saying.
Well, Nick, prejudice.
The hatred for the old Eldian Empire will boil up and all of the countries will work together once they reach the Eldians' level of power to wipe them off the face of the earth. And this is absolutely a possibility. And that's where diplomacy comes in. You see, the reason perception hasn't changed about Eldians in hundreds of years is because Eldians shut themselves away for hundreds of years. And all that was left of Eldians were the Eldians in Marley. And the Marleyans were the most historically oppressed by the Eldians. But let's not act like prejudice can't be overcome. Millions of Jews live in Germany. I know, my great aunt was one of them, and she had to flee her small hometown in Austria in the late 1930s. But once again, I hear what you're saying. You're saying,
Well, yeah, but Marley attacked first.
they sent the Colossal and Armored Titans to recapture the Founding Titan to increase their military strength and get rid of Paradis. To which I say, so did Nagato, so did Obito, so did Vegeta. All characters who, after the main character of their universe decided to close a possible open cycle of hatred, decided to forgive those who had trespassed against them. This is why Pain's ideology didn't work, because giving the entire world pain doesn't end the cycle of hatred, it just spurs it. What Marley did to Paradise Island was unacceptable. But keep in mind, that's what Marley did to Paradise Island. Just Marley. But the rumbling goes beyond the borders of Marley, and it even goes beyond the borders of countries that possibly would have helped Marley. And not only does it go beyond physical borders, but beyond sympathetic borders. It doesn't matter if you believe the subjects of Ymir were good or evil. If you weren't from Paradise Island, you die. It doesn't matter if you're a sympathizer, a hater, or you don't even know what the subjects of Ymir are. Eren's plan kills you. Children, elderly, non-combatants, crushed to death by giant feet because of the actions of 2 or 3 countries. This is no different from the United States deciding that they would drop 2 literal suns on cities stuffed to the gills with non-combatants. And yet people to this day will argue that the nukings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were justified in order to end the World War, as the possible losses of combatants with the continuation of World War II would have exceeded the losses in either of the nukings. We just don't know that. Now, the only concrete thing that we know is that there was children, non-combatants, and elderly, and possibly a lot of combatants that got vaporized one day. You can sit here and speculate and hypothesize that lives were saved in the long run, but you don't know. And what's worse is the people who died as a result of saving these combatants had nothing to do with the war. It was just 2 markings on a map deemed important to the functionality of Japan. Fishermen, dentists, construction workers, gone. And all of this, and I mean all of this, is ignoring one of the most crucial things. Eren, with the power of the Founding Titan, is able to control the anatomy of every single subject of Ymir. Zeke wanted to use this ability to sterilize every subject of Ymir and therefore effectively kill them off in a peaceful way, which is genocide but with a bow on it, as arguably the biggest part of any biological existence is producing progeny. It is the motivation for almost every single living being except for humans, and that's only because some humans are able to overrule the biological want to have children. But the Founding Titan wielder is able to sterilize every subject of Ymir or make them immune to a disease. Who's to say it's out of the realm of possibility that the Founding Titan wielder can simply just take away subjects of Ymir's ability to Titanize? Who's to say that Eren, as the wielder of the Founding Titan, couldn't anatomically separate Titan DNA from the subjects of Ymir? In actuality, it wouldn't be difficult. Eren has complete and utter control over Ymir, and Ymir makes every single Titan. The second a subject of Ymir Titanizes, Ymir gives them a Titan body. Eren could just simply command Ymir to no longer give out Titan bodies. No sterilization, no genocide, just no abilities. It would be as easy as Eren working collaboratively with the likes of Hanji, guaranteeing that Paradise Island gets to a level of technological advancement where they could fight a war using technology, giving them 20 to 30 years to catch up with the rest of the world technologically, all while using the looming threat of the rumbling to keep people off of their island. And then when Paradise Island is to such a level that it can fight its own wars without the use of Titan shifters, just take away your Titan Titan abilities. Prove to the rest of the world that you no longer have Titan abilities, and now you're just an island with a really long wall. Well, I guess the wall's gone, so you're just an island. And sure, at some point or another, you might end up in a war against another nation, but in essence, this plan is exactly denuclearization. Except the problem is the only people with nukes is Paradis. But Eren didn't explore any of these options. It's a possibility he could have just killed Ymir, and with the lack of the founding Titan, all Titan shifter abilities would have subsided to nothing, making subjects of Ymir or Eldians just regular people, and really no longer on anyone's hit list. You see, because this conversation isn't new. It's gone on for as long as the concept of humans evolving new abilities has existed. The most prominent outside example of this conversation is Professor X and Magneto. Professor X represents Hanji and Mikasa and Armin, talented human beings who have received mutant abilities. Mutant abilities that make them arguably stronger or more evolved than regular humans. While Eren is represented by the likes of Magneto, those with superhuman abilities that think with these superhuman abilities that they should rise above all humanity, and that those without superpowers should exist subservient to them. But the irony of this ideology is it's born of discrimination. Because Eren, because Magneto have gone through discrimination, because of these superpowers they've inherited through no will of their own, they believe that the rest of the world deserves to go through what they've been through. So when threatened with something like genocide, a preemptive genocide is launched. That's never the right choice, because reality is what you make it. Acting on a hypothesis or a perception alters the course of history. And while you may feel as though the actions you committed were justified based on the hypothesis or perception you had, if you act preemptively, you'll never know. So this isn't me saying that war shouldn't happen or big bombs shouldn't be used. This is me saying that the human consciousness is the master of its own individual universe. That's the worst thing about humans. Every single human has the ability to alter the course of human history. And unfortunately, a lot of those decisions are made without exhausting all the other options. The quickest way is often deemed the best way, but that shortcut often cuts out morals. We use drone strikes to try to kill leaders of terrorist groups because we deem it the quickest, most efficient, and safest way. That drone strike ends up killing 3 little kids next door. Now, if you were to send in a highly trained group of soldiers, would they be able to kill that terrorist head and not kill those 3 children? We don't know. The terrorists all could have got away, the soldiers all could have died, and on the way out, the terrorists could have shot those 3 kids. But that doesn't matter because it was our actions that killed those 3 little kids. It's Eren's actions that are killing the entire world. So no, what Eren's doing is not morally justified or ethically correct. In the same way that Thanos snapping away half of the universe was neither morally justified or ethically correct. Thanos with the ability to wipe away half of the universe decided to wipe away half of the universe instead of doubling the amount of crops, or changing it so that organic matter didn't need as much food to stay alive, or any food to stay alive. When it comes to genocide, there is always another option, because if you have the power to wipe an entire group of people off the earth, you have the power to do a whole lot of better ideas. But what do I know? I just grew up to horror stories about Nazis kicking down doors of small villages looking for a finite group of people who practice a certain kind of religion, because in the early 1930s, everybody just decided that the Jews are the reason that they lost World War I. Seeing half of a fandom trying to justify a worldwide genocide makes me wildly sad. So if you enjoyed this video, please guys, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Let me just say, Armin is the bomb.